Hello and greetings, Dr. Amin Tarzi. Welcome. Dr. Tarzi is a renowned expert in the Middle East. He is currently Professor of Strategic Studies at the Marine Corps War College and the Middle East Studies Chair at the Marine Corps University in Quantico, Virginia. He's published 50 academic works, more than 50, 100 policy pieces focusing on Iran, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, NATO, the region. And let me kick off with this and welcome. And I'm joined today by Leila Bazi, who is the editor in chief of MBN. And there's lots in the news. And I'm just going to kick off with this. You know, you and I talked, over 20 years ago, before the US invasion of Iraq. And you had a prediction about how things were going to play out, about a reordered Middle East. And every single thing you said came true. So, knowing that you have the crystal ball, I'm going to start big. We're going to have lots of other questions to ask and talk about in our discussion. But okay, here we are. How do you see this playing out, broadly speaking? You know, big war in the Middle East and everybody's being drawn in and so on. How could this play out in the future? Where could this lead us?
Thank you. It's good to see you, my friend, see you in cyberspace after a while.
Yep.
Uh, it's interesting that you recall that conversation. When I joined the Marine Corps University in 2007, after you and I were colleagues a long time ago, I actually made that statement in public. That's at the height of the Iraq War. And I said that and I repeated myself then, and I have been saying it since. It was one of the greatest strategic mistakes by United States of America, by our country in the Middle East, period. I still hold that. Greatest strategic mistakes. Not that I was ever a fan of Saddam Hussein or anything that he represented, anything. It was the fact that it was a war without a clear strategy. It was a war on false premises. And it was a war that the consequences and the aftermath of which actually were much worse than anything Saddam Hussein would have done. And one of them was empowering Iran. Uh, in a way, the Iranians received a gift. It wasn't the plan, but it happened. Unintended consequence of a strategic ambiguity, and I'm being fair about that. It was beyond ambiguity. That what we want to do, and the rest we know what happened. Coming to your question, I don't think we have as a clear answer as I had then, because it was pretty obvious what was happening then. We had a balance of power with the two states in the region that were causing trouble, i.e., Iraq under the Ba'athist regime of Saddam Hussein and the Islamic Republic of Iran. As cynical as some people may say, it was a realistic arrangement that those two countries were balancing each other. And that balance may not have been good for certain aspects of the region, but it was good for keeping them from spreading mayhem across their own borders beyond. Uh, we had a name for it in the US. We called it the dual containment program. Today, it is much more difficult. What I can say, I don't like predicting. I think it was easier. The writing, unfortunately, I say, was on the wall. Here, all I can say without question is the Middle East that we went in with, and it's not just today, this war. This war is an aftermath of the terrorist attacks in Israel in October 7th. Uh, since that, the reactions by the state of Israel, the reactions by the region, the wars, ensuing wars, uh, have changed the Middle East as we know it. There, that's what I'm saying. We are not going back to where we were. That I can make a hard. statement. Other than that, it's many other factors that could determine what might happen in the future.
Dr. Tarzi, you said it's not the Middle East as we know it. You and Andrew spoke about Iraq. Even though Iraq and Iran are two different scenarios, things have evolved since then. So at the moment, Iran was able to retaliate. At the moment, Iranian strikes have hit every Gulf state, from cities like Doha, Dubai, to critical infrastructure like the LNG hub, oil fields, and ports. Now, we heard the Saudi Foreign Minister, Prince Faisal bin Farhan, saying trust in Iran is completely shattered, warning that patience is not unlimited. They are escalating. So, are we witnessing the collapse of the old Gulf security architecture as we used to know it and shift towards open confrontation, or is this still calibrated deterrence under pressure?
Okay, that's a very informed question. The Gulf architecture was based mostly on external factors. The Gulf countries, specifically the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, to a lesser degree Qatar, they acquired quite formidable defensive and offensive forces. However, the whole idea of the GCC, Majlis Ta'awun, the Gulf Cooperation Council, was Iran. Let's not kid ourselves. Saddam Hussein had an issue specifically after 1990 invasion of Kuwait, but it was mainly because of an Iranian threat that came out in '79. Iraqi situation exacerbated that. However, the reason for GCC was not to become a union of, that their nationals do not have a visa issue between the countries. It was to be a defensive alliance. That aspect never ever happened. Let's not kid ourselves. And I think that actually was shattered even before this threat. When UAE and Saudi Arabia almost threatened each other over Yemen, that shattered that. So I think what is changing now, so that was not there. So most of these states relied on an outside power. In this case, mostly was the United States, one way or the other. But they were trying, and this goes back to the first question that Andres asked, they were trying to, as the United States was pivoting, I use that term, whether it was real or perceived, there was a policy idea going back to President Obama, not just President Trump or Biden, but Trump won and Biden, but Obama, that the U.S. is pivoting more towards China and later on towards Russia. There was an idea to augment that security blanket, if you would, with the Chinese, at least politically and economically, if not militarily, even the Russians, and also to have a regional balance, not going after Iran, trying to appease Iran, trying to make sure that there's no more war. And I think that has collapsed for various reasons. Number one, that I think the Gulf countries may not rely on the U.S. as much. As you know, everybody in the Gulf countries were very much, all of them, was very much against this escalation because of what you're seeing right now.
Yes.
Also, if they were looking at China and Russia, they would be very disappointed. Whether it's unwillingness on part of Beijing and Moscow or inability, doesn't really matter at this point. Well, it matters in the long run, but right now, whether it's an inability or unwillingness to support Iran, which they have agreements, especially Russia.
we've seen what Russia did with Al-Assad
Exactly.
and with
Yeah,
the
well, at least they
they
gave
have
him a
done
house.
with
They gave him a job.
yeah,
That's about it. So
yes,
he's living in Moscow and then drinking vodka. But other than that,
yeah.
there's not much there. So if you were looking at those two, you would be disappointed. So this is what I'm saying. There has to be an internal reassessment by the Gulf countries of how this looked. One reassessment was the Abraham Accords. Let's not forget the fact that you had the UAE, Bahrain, at the time Sudan, but Sudan is not really part of that. But mainly those two countries. Yeah, Morocco again.
Yep.
Morocco has been always. I mean, it's so far away. Maghreb here, the West is really the West in that sense. But specifically the
Even
UAE, the most
Morocco from North
active of the
Africa.
Abraham Accord.
Yeah,
Security was a major issue of it. The threat of Iran was a major issue about it. So
yes.
that also is not as it looked like pre-October 7th, and especially now, given what is happening today. So I think there's a reassessment. Would it be back internally in the Gulf? I think that could be there. There has to be an agreement between Abu Dhabi and Riyadh. Those two. That's it.
The Gulf states have
Yeah.
invested heavily in their security relationship with Washington. Okay? Yet they now find themselves directly exposed. There are at the same time conflicting signals from the US, including differences over prior knowledge of Israeli strikes, raises further uncertainties. Are we seeing a breakdown of the US security guarantee? And is the Gulf now paying the price for the decisions it neither supported nor was fully consulted on? Like you said, they are not with the war,
Yes.
the Gulf countries.
Look, let us first look at what's going on the ground. If you look at the number of missiles, drones, and different types of projectiles that Iran has launched at the Gulf states, and what has actually hit targets, there is a lot of, you can look at the numbers. So there is that security blanket. If there was no defensive measures, if there was no American, just not specific weapon system and training, but also other aspects of mitigating that, the devastation would have been unfathomable. It's very difficult to protect the north, Pars oil fields, gas field. That's the largest gas field in the Middle East. Protecting that from Iranian attack is possible, but that's very difficult, especially the fact that it's sitting inside a body of water. But the cities and infrastructure, military targets has been protected. So what you see, the damage you see is you have to, it's easy to look at the damage rather than what was launched. So if you do an analysis, you see that that security assessment is still there. This is not Russia and China trying to defend. There is actually a lot happening on the ground. The question here is one missile too much or two missiles too much in a country like United Arab Emirates or Dubai? Because for them, what's Dubai's main purpose? It's to be a hub of security. They're not an oil place. Abu Dhabi is, but Dubai is not. They're there to create a secure area for investment, for banking, well, if you're buying a property in Dubai right now, you'll think twice about it for the foreseeable future. So those damages are long term. So if one missile too much, Iran knew that and they knew that. So here's a reassessment of the threat perception and the threshold of pain. Now, how that happens, I would be very, very careful of making these blanket things that the American security system is gone. Yes, they see that there's a cost for the American. Absolutely. The question is, what is the alternative? As we just discussed, Russia and China are not the alternative for various reasons. China may be in the long-term future. Russia is not capable. They can't thankfully, from my perspective, take over, a part of Ukraine in 4 years in a full-fledged war next to their own borders. They can't do it. China there are other issues in there. China. So the question again comes back to your first point. The second, not your second question, is what does the Gulf do itself? They're very aware of what's going on. If they can redesign their own assessment, and here I'll be very blunt, they have to accept that Saudi Arabia, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, is the largest by far. It has a strategic debt. Their main centers are much further away. I mean, Jeddah is far away from the battlefield, Riyadh even. They don't have everything sitting there. Yes, the oil fields are mostly on the eastern province, but the rest of them have to reassess how this happens. So, and they have to accept that the GCC will be a Saudi-dominated, if it's a military arrangement. The question is whether it'll be Saudi dictated or just Saudi dominated. Those are all the questions that it's not for me as an American citizen to question, but I think those thinkings will come in that area and see what happens.
Well, let me throw something else into the mix. You know, the nuclear issue clearly comes up whenever anybody talks about Iran. But you were also, I know, at the Center for Non-Proliferation Studies, and there's a looming question about non-proliferation, is that it's not just Iran, it's also Saudi Arabia. So the nuclear equation in the region, how does it look different? I mean, we know what either did or didn't happen to the Iranian nuclear program, but that's not the only potential nuclear power in the region. And I'm curious how you think all of this is going to affect that.
Yes, that's my past. At least the countries we were looking at, none of them have become nuclear. So we are so far so good. But I would not talk about the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's nuclear potential right now. I do talk about Iranian potential because, and that of course will have an effect on the region. Saudis, even other countries, the NATO member there in the Middle East, it becomes a utility of nuclear. So far in the region, there's this perception, true or false, we can look at it, is that if a country possesses nuclear weapons, that country is immune from being attacked by the big powers, United States or whatever. And the case given always is Korea, North Korea, it flaunts it launches missiles over Japan, threatens South Korea every day with total destruction, yet North Korea is intact. And then it goes back to Libya and so on and so forth. That, unfortunately, at least in the mind of the strategists in the region, may become more and more plausible and desirable. If that becomes, unfortunately, we may see more desire to go nuclear. The question here again is, unless somebody buys a full-fledged weapon, it is a very difficult, as you see, the Iranians have achieved most of the steps for a nuclear weapon program. They completed the fuel cycle. IAEA, not any government, but United Nations International Atomic Energy Agency, said that they have 60%. 60% is a weapons-grade uranium. And if you want to make it 95%, there is no additional technological advances. All you have to do is spin it more. Where they were still stuck, from what we hear in the open sources, is on the weaponization. So Iran, which is way ahead of any country in the region for domestic production, could not do it. It's not as easy as people think it is. So getting it, even if you want it, if you decide that maybe getting a nuclear weapon gives you an umbrella, I think it may invite more damage to you. Iran is again case in point, than giving you that blanket. So I will remain ambiguous on that. I think this war has given nuclear weapons a second life, if you would, but also may have given it a second threat assessment, saying, well, maybe it's not the best thing because look at Iran. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, speaking of Iran's threats to the region, I'd like to talk a bit about the proxies, and I want to bring Leila in here as well as somebody from Lebanon. Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah, and so on. How is that changing? What's that going to look like in the future?
Can I throw something in here,
Please.
Andres? With the latest updates, I'm sure Dr. Tarzi is familiar with it. They caught a cell in Kuwait, and it's not the first time, okay? And yesterday it was in UAE, Hezbollah cells. And now we don't have confirmed information about Qatar. Of course, Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthis. So how do you see Iran will start their pressure from within these Gulf countries?
I'm glad you bring in that second point of it. After October 7th, the Israelis did a almost unimaginable decapitation of most of what we call the proxies. The Houthis were perhaps the only exception that were not decapitated, and partially because they made deals. As you know, the Houthis made a deal with the US through the mediation of the Sultanate of Oman to not attack US ships, and they have held on to that. That's one reason they're still there, because nobody's attacked. At least US is not attacking them, because they have not attacked a single US flagged ship since that agreement. The rest of them, in the jewel of the crown, which is Hezbollah always been, were decimated. And between then and now, you saw that some of these proxies or longhand or allies, whatever you want to call them, Iran calls them the longhand too, they were deterred. The Houthis were deterred. And Iraq, you saw that the Iraqi, Hashd al-Sha'bi, or all of those groups, they were deterred. The first attack on Israel by Iran after October 7th, they joined. The second one, they did not join, despite Iranian requests. So it means that
They don't have the capabilities like Hezbollah in Lebanon.
But Hezbollah stopped after a while, because they understood both Hezbollah and the Iraqis are also political organizations. At the end of the day, if they cause their own people incredible damage and destruction, they lose that political platform they have. They're not, most of these are not wanton running around terrorists. They are terrorists, but they are also, they have political agendas. So
Yes.
I think they have been deterred. So there was a change in the whole concept of how they work. For Iran, the greatest loss was not just Hassan Nasrallah and the cadre of Hezbollah, but it was Syria. That was not the doing of Israel or United States, but the fact that Syria fell, that's the only Arab state that supported the state. In Lebanon, of course, you have, Hezbollah is very powerful, but the state of Lebanon is
No, it does not support that. True.
Yeah. But Syria Syria fell, it opened up a whole new ball game for them. Today, as what you heard from you, is I think what is happening is a recalibration of these more cells, more terrorist attacks inside places, more targeted attacks, because they, as you said, the inability to launch massive strikes. Hezbollah is still doing it right now, but I don't think that's going to last too long for various reasons. But I think what you're going to see is more of these long-term pressure points after this war is over, to make sure the Gulf countries understand that Iran, while on its knees and while rebuilding, still has capacity to inflict damage within small nodes, but within them. So the terrorist aspect will be there, and they have to demonstrate in order to be valid. That's the sad point of terrorism. They have to demonstrate, meaning they have to blow something up to show that they're still there. I personally see that you're going to see more of that and less of the rocket attacks. In case of Hezbollah, it's very different, because during this period of post-October 7, Hezbollah even were trying to negotiate with Israelis on things like water rights. So they are a bit more internally part of Lebanon. They have the numbers. And whether Hezbollah chooses to become more of a political animal or remain as a military component, that would determine how it reacts, in my view. Again, you have a much better understanding of Lebanon than I might have, but that's how I regard it. Thank you.
I want to shift a little bit to the Strait of Hormuz because we know that geography and how Strait of Hormuz, it's not an open water way. It's a narrow passage where shipping lanes run close to Iran's rugged coastline. And this what makes the leverage for Iranian on it. So even, okay, so does this geography fundamentally limit the ability of the US or anybody? Because we all know that President Trump did ask the allies to intervene and to have some kind of security for the ships to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, and there was a decline. So even with the naval escort, does the ship can be fully protected?
Look, yes, I have been through that Hormuz. I know how it works. Let me first say, this is a message to my old employers, the United Arab Emirates. There's been this plan to build a canal near Fujairah straight as a secondary through the Emirati territory. If I were a decision maker in the UAE, I'll put most of my money. I want this is my own perception. I like that area. I wanted peace in there. Instead of building buildings, I would make that canal. That basically clarifies all of these problems. Then you don't have to deal with Iran or anybody else. It goes right through the UAE territory, and it's doable. The technology is there. It just needs a little bit of commitment. But that's not going to happen overnight, even if they started today digging it. Where will it start is Iran needs money as well. The threat in the Gulf in Hormuz, yes, it's a choke point and gives Iran an ability to do what it's doing right now. But as you heard, I'm hearing it in media that the United States might even ease sanctions on Iranian oil that's floating out there. You know that there's a lot of oil floating in the open seas. If that happens and there is a negotiated settlement of this war, which I think that's what's going to happen, and hopefully sooner than later. If that happens, it's an interest of Iran as well as the interest of the Gulf countries to ensure the security of that waterway. The waterway has been under the gun for a long time. Threats were there, but not. Iran also wants security of it because at the end of the day, they want to make sure that the waterways are open, not just for the Chinese ship, as they say right now, or chosen ships, but rather for everybody. So that is more a political decision making and market driven rather than a military. The military just has to cease attacking. The mines are very easy to clear. Whoever laid them can clear them. Sea mines are not like land mines. They're much more easier to take out than land mines. Unfortunately, have a habit of disappearing. So that's the key. The other thing that one has to see is even before the canal. If I don't know what the UAE decision will be on that canal, it's been there. It's been in the idea has been there. It's not my idea. It's been there for a long time. The Saudis do have a whole different way to go out in Yanbu and the Red Sea. I think you're going to see a lot more oil from the east, at least Saudi oil, go towards the Red Sea. Of course, that is further away from Asia, which is Saudi Arabia's main destination for its oil. And also they have to go through the Houthis, so there's another choke point there.
There's another one.
And for business, as you know, each of these costs a lot. The cost is exacerbated in the pumps and also in the markets. So, and also Fujairah, UAE has a pipeline. It's not as big as it should be, but UAE has, unlike the rest of them. Qatar is one that has a big problem because they don't have any other way out. Kuwait could use the Saudis. They haven't done it. There's no connectivity around. Bahrain is not really a major oil producer. But Qatar would be the country that would be the most affected. UAE has an option, but that option is not fully integrated yet. The Saudis will be shifting with cost less if the Iranians continue to play. But my own view, this is my personal view, I think once the hostilities are ceased, the Iranians would make sure that that waterway is clear. And I think they most likely would ensure that the Arab neighbors accept some kind of a apology and stability. But this depends on who takes over in Iran or who comes on top. We have no idea right now. I mean, because you saw their president, Mr. Pezeshkian, actually kind of apologized, but then you had the hardliners say, no, we're doing it. So they are playing kind of the good cop, bad cop. Who comes up on top should this government survive? The system survive, the regime. The regime is not a negative word. In Persian, it's called nizam. Nizam in Persian means system. So if the nizam survives, the question is, how are they going to calibrate their relationship with their southern neighbors? And that also determines what the Hormuz Straits will look like. I personally don't think of it as becoming closed or even threatened. Look at the Houthis. As I said, the Houthis are not touching a single ship, U.S. ship, since that agreement. And they are supposed to be not a state, right? So that works.
So I opened really big about the future and so on. I want to, since it's Nowruz, it's Iranian New Year, just to pause briefly on Iran itself. You know, speaking of Nowruz, this is the first Iranian New Year in memory when the supreme leader did not address the nation. And of course, that raises the question of where's the supreme leader? As we all know, I mean, the phrase now is where's Mujtaba, right? So the father's gone, son seems to be missing. You know, from what the information that you have access to and your own speculation about what this regime would do in this type of situation, who do you think's calling the shots? You know, it's we have Mr. Ghalibaf, we have other people sort of looming around, and we have the President Pezeshkian, but of course there's the IRGC. So who do you think is deciding things, and like what in your assessment, what's going on internally?
I would have said until 3 days ago, I would have said that Mr. Ali Larijani was the one who was at least the nod where people went to. Not that he called the shots. I don't even think when Khamenei, the father, was alive that he called the shots. And I am on record for that. I have written it. I think we took too much credit to what they said was going on. Khamenei, before being killed, was a very, very old, detached individual. His name worked. Right now, they're trying to see if Mujtaba's name works. I don't think it is working, just because he was always very much a recluse. I think he's following the examples of his eastern neighbor, in this case, of the Taliban leader. They're in hiding, in ghaiba, the occultation. But this doesn't help, as you said, when your country is under attack and the dude is not, is missing in action. I don't know who's calling the shots. I think by design, what they have done, and this is a double-edged sword. By design, after the last year's campaign, 2025 campaign, what Israel called it, the Rising Lion, and the U.S. called it, our part of the operation, Midnight Hammer, the Iranians woke up from a long slumber, because it wasn't just the penetration by military. That part, they could say the American and Israeli forces are much more powerful and they have incredible abilities. The fact that, on my view, thankfully, not a single plane was shot down. But that's the least of it. It's the absolute, catastrophic, functional, strategic, operational, tactical, you name it, intelligence failure, that they lost their people in their homes. That means that what they did between this 1 year, in my view, this is my own assessment, is that they made sure that they have layers of command. So if you kill the first one, it's the second one. Somebody gets up there, which makes responding to your question almost impossible. All you can say is guesstimates. And this is what I said to my previous question on the Hormuz answer. It depends on who finally comes. Somebody's going to come up on top eventually. Once the dust settles and the regime survives, if the regime survives and the dust will settle, whether the regime survives or not, that's still not 100%. Whoever comes on top could be a third layer per person that we don't know. And that individual, it will be a he, so I can't say she in this case, he will determine it. He may be somebody that we don't know. It could be a colonel. And that colonel will
Can I
determine whether he
interrupt
goes
you in
one way or
here?
the other.
Can I interrupt you in
Yeah.
here? We do have our reporter in Erbil, and he took from several sources of the Iranian opposition, something we're reporting on now, and they are talking about Mohsen Radai. What do you think of that?
Look, there's a lot of names that were being popped up there, of course. I again, nobody, including the late Shah's son, who lives here somewhere in Maryland, has a ground support beyond the support on the street. The street right now has been silenced. I mean, this is the same regime that killed anywhere between 7 to 30,000 of their own people on the streets, or even more, maybe, in January. So they have no problem killing their own people. The problem is that whatever name you talk about, these people have no organizational support inside. And that's the key. The most visible, obviously, is Muhammad Reza Jr. He has the face of his father, almost looks exactly the same thing, but he's been living here for 40 something years. This is the same thing that we did the case in Afghanistan and Iraq. You know, we sent Chalabi in Iraq. Well, we forgot that. And Ashraf Ghani from here to Afghanistan. It has to be, I'm not saying it has to be somebody who's living in Iran, but it has to be somebody who has an internal understanding. And I don't know who it will be. It also is somebody, in my view, that has to give not just the IRGC, but the controlling mechanism today, which is led by the IRGC, a reassurance that there's not going to be a massacre for them. Because if they regard their future as hanging from different places in Tehran, they're not going to give up. If you push them to the wall, they have enough repressive power to keep on fighting. So this is why I say a colonel. Colonel is the last apolitical military line. I know everybody. I say colonel, they say a Gaddafi. I say maybe a Gaddafi. but you get a colonel at that level that it is acceptable to the West because that individual is not known as a butcher, but it also allows internal factors to say, okay, this guy is one of us, and then they can put a different face on because they need time to recover. There's not much left there, by the way. When this war ends, the Iranians will be in a very, very, very dire situation. Whether we like it or not, the Chinese will be there. They will be reconstructing Iran, not us, not the Turks, not the Emiratis. It will be the Chinese. So you will see China coming in. Long term, I think you're going to see China much more powerful in the region. By default.
You are opening another question for us. It's something we have to follow up on with you, sir.
Absolutely. I mean, this has been just a riveting conversation, Dr. Tazi. I really look forward to the next one.
Look, I used to have hair before I joined the Middle East studies, so that makes your hair, but thank you. No, look, thank you very much. It is now rules for me. I come from the same tradition, and the Zoroastrian tradition that says Guftaranik, Kirdaranik, Pindaranik. And I believe in that. I want to kind of end that, if we are ending it. We have to say good things, positive things, think positively and well, and do that. And those three, if we do, this region has seen so much mayhem, and I think wherever those people come from, I hope there are more ladies in there, but I was brought up by a single mother, so I believe in power. I think there will be, but right now, let's just leave that. An individual that comes in that allows the region to breathe and reassess themselves their own way, make their mistakes, but with a vision to the future that's not all a zero-sum game. I hope that comes in for the future. I think because it's an Eid as well, and it just happens that Nowruz and Eid are on the same day.
Nowruz and Ramadan, yes.
And Ramadan
Fitr.
finished. Nowruz is always the same thing because we, it follows a solar system, but
So it's the same. You go back different like Ramadan.
no, it doesn't.
You're
No,
backwards
because
or
Ramadan
forward?
is based on the moon, so it goes.
Yes.
This is. It only difference is in leap years. It changes from 21st to 20th of. So it's the first day of spring in the northern hemisphere.
So we've covered the Straits of Hormuz to the moon to the sun. Dr. Tarzi, on that note, and Leila Bazi, thank you very much for a brilliant conversation. I'm looking forward to many more happening soon.
Absolutely. I at your service, and have a very, very good day, both of you. And shukran jazilan with Shakir Awi.